We're in the third dimension. What we tend to not understand is that time really doesn't exist. Clocks exist. Big time mainstream quantum physicists and theoretical physicists are admitting that this is true now. We've been given this functional arrow of time, which puts us in one specific direction, so that we can organize our thoughts and our days and our years and weeks and what we're going to do and where we're going to meet up with somebody and everything else. So we have this ability to coordinate and collaborate with each other. However, if you understand that time is also an illusion, it's something that you can use as a tool, but if you also understand that it's an illusion, then you can actually master time and you can maximize what you're doing on this planet. Because if you go in all the higher dimensions, you know, we're in the third. So if you draw a line on a piece of paper, that's the first dimension. If you then connect those lines and create a house on a piece of paper, that's a two-dimensional structure, or you can move that into a computer. Anything you see in a computer that looks 3D is actually 2D. And because we're in the third, we can see down into 2D, we can see all the way down obviously into 1D, and we can manipulate those dimensions from our higher selves. Now, there are beings in fourth, fifth, and sixth dimensions. There's people above us. Because of that, they see us and they recognize the past, present, and future operating all at the same time. Everything's happening at once. There is no separation between the past, present, and the future. The arrow doesn't exist. Because they're higher than us, they can look down into the third and they can see into what we're doing. The fourth dimension is something called a tesseract. If you go into the ancient text, it's Metatron's cube, meta, M-E-T-A, metaverse, right? They got that from Metatron's cube. Now, this fourth dimension is really something called a quasi-crystal. And this quasi-crystal in the fourth dimension, it casts a shadow, and the shadow that it casts, it creates the realm that we're living in here. We're living in a shadow of a higher dimension. That shadow creates the third dimension. It actually creates a fractal of it, creates this fractal holographic matrix that we're actually maneuvering in the third dimension right now. You can address a fourth dimension of time like Albert Einstein was saying if you're just looking at a third plus a fourth being the arrow. But when you actually move up into another dimension, we now know in quantum physics that there is actually a fourth dimension. So all dimensions are in 90-degree angles of each other. And according to quantum theory right now, we're really anticipating that there's at least 11 dimensions, or otherwise the universe would collapse. So there really is truly a fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, all the way up, not just the arrow of time. That's just something extra. I believe personally, just based off of my research, and I've gone through now over 1,000 scriptures, texts, papyruses, cuneiform tablets from all over the world. They all have a very similar story. All these ancient civilizations talk about beings, not just beings who came here from other planets, people that look like us, not identical, but very similar. In other words, a bilateral, bipedal hominid of some type that can maneuver around, that has appendages that can manipulate the environment, because without that, you can't move out into space and other places. And they also talk about multidimensional. You get into like the Nag-Hammadi and stuff like that. You're talking about multidimensional beings. And so in physics, in quantum physics in particular, they started theorizing on these dimensions and were able to even analyze and discover some that they actually do exist. And on top of that, they realized that the dimensions are stacked, so packed, so tight on top of one another, that if you can phase shift your atomic structure, your subatomic frequency, you can walk right into another dimension. And so they started postulating, what if beings from higher dimensions, or some of these apparitions and these paranormal phenomena that we're seeing, are they able to maybe take a glimpse or a peek? Are they phasing through into our universe? And so from higher dimensions. And so they started really theorizing it. It seems to be, and based on my research, that there's people living everywhere. Not just, and I'm not talking about little green men with antenna. I think that there's people living all throughout this universe in the third dimension. And I think there's people living all throughout even higher multiple dimensions. There were 144,000 casing stones on the Great Pyramid. Some religions believe that only 144,000 people are going to make it to heaven, or what they call the paradise. And so we see this recurring theme of this 144 being a very important number, even in the biblical text. 144,000, angels are coming down with Jesus on his return. And so there's always this theme of this 144,000 over and over again throughout history, through many different civilizations and through many vastly different time periods. It makes you scratch your head like, what is up with this 144,000? It's got to be a significant number, or they wouldn't have put 144,000 casing stones on the Great Pyramid. So there's a reason behind this, and it has a deep significance that goes far beyond any text that we have laying around, even the biblical text, even the Sumerian text. I think it goes even far beyond that. The oldest account of the Great Pyramid being built is in the Emerald Tablets, and that was approximately between 36,000 to 38,000 years ago, when Thoth, the Atlantean priest king who ruled over the land of Chem before it was called Egypt for 14,000 years, he wrote down himself in his own tablets that he had built the Great Pyramid patterned after Earth's force, and he built it to stand the test of time so that it too might remain through the ages, which it has. And so you have to think, at the time that he architected this and drew the floor plan for this and had it created and built, he already had worked in 144,000 casing stones. So we're talking about this number 144,000 going back at least 36 to 38,000 years ago.
We measure our life in terms of days, of 24 hours, referred to as a tropical or solar day. And it turns out that 24 of these hours are 1,440 minutes. This is one of the key numbers within the ancient canon of numerical cosmology that the ancients used to basically design and create their world. The 1,440 minutes equates to 86,400 seconds. If you just listen to these numbers, look at them, and let them kind of soak into your brain, once you've gotten into this as actually a system, a methodology of transmitting information, these numbers are actually carriers of information because each number stands for meanings beyond just the apparent ones. So we see 1,440 minutes is equal to 86,400 seconds, and a 12-hour span of time, which is usually represented on the clock, 720 minutes, which equals 43,200 seconds. Just look at those numbers. You'll think that obviously 43,200 is half of 86,400. So these are just examples of some of the time measures, how we think about time in our particular culture. Space measure, we talk about a foot, we talk about of 12 inches, we talk about a square foot, and you'll notice that the square foot has the same repetition of digits, 144, as the 24 hours does. All we do is we pack a zero on that. We have the number of minutes in a day, 144 square inches. Now it turns out that if you ever read the book of Revelations, which I highly recommend if you're interested in symbolism and esoterica, the book of Revelations talks about the holy city, which was revealed to St. John the Divine in a vision on the mountaintop. And a man with a measuring line reveals to him this vision of the holy city. And the holy city is described as having a wall around it, and the wall is described as being 144 cubits. That number is preserved in the scriptural writings. We have a cubic foot equaling 1728. I want to call your attention to the 1 square yard, which is 1,296 inches. As it turns out, we can stick a zero on the end of that, and we have 12,960 years, which turns out to be an awesomely important span of time in terms of some of the great cycles that affect this planet.
Like Tesla said, you can discover the mystery of 369, you know the mysteries of the universe. But yeah, the 9 is a pretty significant number because it is an important number in a lot of mathematical computations, first and foremost. The final digit in numerology, the presence of 9 suggests a chapter may be coming to an end. Witnessing 9 as an angel number is a sign that a meaningful cycle could come to a close and you'll soon have a beginning of a brand new journey.
Now, another thing you might notice about most of these numbers from 1440 to 8640, 43,200, 144, 1728, 36, 1296 is that they all Kabbalistically add up and reduce to the single digit 9. Notice that all of them. Pick any one of them, other than say with the exception of 24, but 1440 adds and reduces to a single digit 9. 1296, you'll notice the same thing. 1 and 2 and 9 and 6 is 18, which adds to a 9. Here we have the alphabet of sacred geometry, and these are the simplest forms. These are the polygons. You have a circle, which is actually not a polygon, but we have an equilateral triangle, a square, and a pentagon. And each of these can be measured by the number of degrees that determine the angles of the sides. So for example, we look at a circle, which is just a special case of an ellipse with eccentricity of 0. We've covered this already, so let's go right to the equilateral triangle. And we'll see it's 60, 60, and 60, which equals 180 degrees. Again, notice that we've got the number 9 recurring. We go to the square, which is 4 times 90 degrees. The total number of degrees defining the square is 360, the same as the circle, the same as the measure of a circle. And we measure the polygons by essentially measuring the angles of the vertices or the corners. Then likewise with the pentagon, each of the angles between successive edges is 108 degrees. So you multiply the 108 times 5 and you get 540. Again, notice, everything adds up to 9. If you take 25,920 seconds and set each second corresponding to 1 year, you'll discover it's exactly 432 minutes. 25,920 hours in turn is 1,080 days. And 25,920 days is equal to 72 years in the sacred calendar, which is interesting because I think most determinations of the average human lifespan right now in history is about 72 years. In the Vayu Purana, we find verses like this: 360 years, according to the human calculation, constitute one divine year. Wise people know that there are 4 yugas in Bharata Varsa. The first one is Kreta, then follow Treta, Dvapara, and Kali. They have another, the Vedas recognize as a sacred year that they call, or a divine year, which is 360 of our years. Now here's a tabulation of the Vedic ages. And you'll notice, we'll look first at the total in human years.